Welcome everybody to the Civalgo podcast, the podcast that is giving back to the construction industry in terms of advice, tactics, and best practices. Today we're going to talk about the job site of yesterday with the challenges of tomorrow, and I'm super excited to have with us a Roadwork veteran, Levac. How are you doing, Ivan, today?
Very good, Alex. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here and be able to talk to you.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about what happened yesterday and in the past on the construction job sites and the challenges we had, but we're also going to move into the changes that we brought to our industry today and our perspective on the future. Maybe before we deep dive inside the subjects, I would like to ask our audience to, if they want to help us with our mission, to share this podcast with our networks so that we can improve the construction industry together. So without further ado, Ivan, how about you talk to us a little bit about your background and where you come from?
Sounds good. So I'm a Franco-Ontarian from Northern Ontario. Lived in Northern Ontario until the end of high school and then moved to the Ottawa region. Finished my high school, went to University of Ottawa, and graduated in civil engineering in 2000. So that's when I got into the construction industry. And to be honest, I didn't have a background in construction whatsoever prior to that. My parents didn't work in the construction industry. Even though I graduated in civil engineering, I would say that I had very little insight as to what the road building industry did. So I can talk about my last co-op was with Lafarge in the Ottawa area, where I worked in quality control. That carried on into a career where I started in 2000 working in the labs. I did about 2 years with labs with aggregate and asphalt quality control. My office moved to Gatineau, where I started working in the Quebec market, which was very different. My first language is French, and I was fully immersed in a French work environment. After about 2 years of working in quality control, I became an estimator, where I learned a lot more about the construction industry. I spent way more time. I was being tutored by somebody who'd been an estimator and project manager for 40 years. And I was hired to be his replacement as an estimator, which is where I really learnt the basics about road building.
So the big shift, right, from quality control to now needing to understand productivity on work sites and
absolutely
and building estimates. That's very interesting. And how much time did you spend in estimation?
I spent about 6 years in estimation, and in the first 2 years as an estimator, I was being mentored. I was being shown what to do. After 2 years, I started working on many of the projects that I was successful. The tenders were successful, so I would become the project manager. I was a junior project manager. We called ourselves project managers back then, but I would basically spend time out in the field with the foreman, with the crews, learning from them about real productivity issues, real challenges with materials, equipment, how to actually get the work done. And I really believe that was a good trajectory for me to have taken, because I would bid work without really knowing how the work was performed in the field. I was being mentored, I was being tutored. When I would get into the field and I would work with the crews, I would actually see the errors and the mistakes that I was making in the tenders. So it was perfect training ground for somebody to get out in the field, really see the real life work being performed. After multiple years of working with those same crews, I was then in a position where I'd be able to guide them a little bit better to say, today we're going to do this. We've got a couple different approaches. What do you want to do? And they would choose an approach. And after several years of experience, I was then in a position to say, well, I think we should actually do it this way, because here's what's coming down the road. It was a really good way to gain valuable experience. And one of the interesting things about the construction, the road building industry, is every project is different. So every time you get out there and you see a project, you learn something new. So you don't learn things in a year or 2 years. It takes many years of experience to actually witness and see how things are done in the field. And it was a really good learning experience for me.
Yeah, you can't replace that experience.
No.
The field, no matter how many years in school,
absolutely not.
You can't replace that field experience. And it's a really good contrast to see exactly how you bid the job, and then you're scratching your head. It's like, that you didn't bid it that way, but that's the right way. So you learn your lesson, and then you do it differently. But
yeah, and then the next time you're bidding a job, you may bid it the way you saw it executed in the field, but you may also be able to refer back to 5 or 6 different projects that you've seen that are similar and say, on average, this is how I should be bidding it. That project went really well, that one didn't go well. You don't want to bid every project the way they could go, because most of the time you'll end up losing a little bit of money at the end of the day. You need to bid averages, estimate averages. So after my time at Tomlinson, in 2024, I came to work for GIP, which is Green Infrastructure Partners, a large road building contractor, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and we have some operations in Quebec as well. I work for a particular division of GIP that sells the liquid asphalt cement, which is basically the liquid that goes in the roads, in the asphalt. And my role is very different from what I had in the past, whereas I would have managed construction operations. When my last role in construction was general manager of construction operations, I'm now business development and sales for liquid asphalt cement, and I deal only with external contractors. I have no relations with selling asphalt cement to GIP. My role is all relationships and sales with contractors that also have asphalt plants that compete in the Ontario market and the Quebec market. It's a very interesting role, completely different from what I would have done in the past. The advantage of this role is that I get to meet senior deciders and owners of companies all throughout Ontario and Quebec and even other jurisdictions on regular occasion. So my past experience has put me in a great position to be able to work with people in the industry who utilize our products.
So you learned a lot about field execution as an estimator that became a project manager or a junior project manager, boots on the ground, helped you evolve. Back then, what did you see that was like major challenges?
Well, technology wasn't the same back then, right? So you didn't necessarily have immediate access to your costing. Communications with field staff was different. Back in those days, we had flip phones, so you didn't have smartphones. You weren't texting people. You weren't really communicating as instantly as you are now. And to be honest, there were some advantages with that because you didn't necessarily expect information right away. You weren't always on the phone. You weren't being hammered with conversations or text or email saying, I need this information today. People were a little bit more self-sufficient back then. You were often working in areas in where I worked. Sometimes we would be an hour outside of the city with no cell phone reception. So people really had to be resilient to be able to, or self-sufficient to be able to get the work done without having to rely on somebody bringing them a new piece of equipment or material that they didn't have, or I forgot something at the office. So you had to be much more able to plan your work out on a daily basis without relying on other people to just bring it to you at everybody's whim when you needed things. Now, things were a lot different back then, and I would say that for the better part of our industry still relies on many people with years and years of experience. As I would say over the last 25 years in my career, you're seeing people with less experience who are in more senior positions, field-wise or office-wise. And one of the challenges with that is that they don't have those many years of experience to have seen different issues and different problems. So it's just the nature of the industry we're in. Unfortunately, the demographic, people are aging, and we're losing many of the people with a lot of experience.
So there's a lot was said here. So
yeah.
to revert back on being more creative and self-sufficient on the job sites. I mean, one of my construction mentors told me that they didn't call. They couldn't call into the office. They had to find solutions during the day. And when they get to the shop at the end of the day, that's where the transfer of information would get done, right? Yeah. So back then, it was not like getting deliveries, and we didn't have people driving around in trucks just bringing stuff randomly, right? Mm-hmm. We had to make it work. And don't get me wrong, it was productive also back then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So is that are there items from yesterday that you think we were doing well that we should project in the future and keep those methods?
One of the things that I think that was really great about the industry back then that I don't think we will see again is that the younger generation would come into the industry and they would really put their time into certain positions before progressing to the next one. there's some good and there's some bad about that. The challenge with today's society is that, you know, the cost of life is tremendous in comparison to what it was back then. If you look at, you know, the average family income versus
It's crazy.
a mortgage, is
Yeah.
you know, the average mortgage per family income is more than doubled. So it is much more expensive to live. There's a lot more competition out there. So kids naturally get into a job and they want to progress more quickly so they can make more money, so they can have, you know, better quality of life. You see a lot more, and especially with technology nowadays, you can search for jobs, you can see openings elsewhere. There's a lot more moving from one job to the next. I think one of the things that used to happen that was great for our industry is people would put more time into the work before progressing to the next level. Myself, I changed jobs, I'd say in the first 13, 14 years of my career, I changed positions. The longest stint I did was an estimator for 6 years, but I changed positions roughly every 2 or 3 years, and I was offered to move up. So I worked hard, I performed well, I was offered promotions, and I would move up from one position to the next. And almost every time I would say, but I could have spent another 2 or 3 years in that position to really master it a little bit more, to be more knowledgeable. But there's such a demand for people that I would get offers, and I would and all within the same company, but I would move up. You know, I maybe to go back to my history, I've only changed companies really twice in the 25 years of my career. So
Amazing.
I was with Lafarge, that was bought out by Coco. I left Coco in 2013 for a company called Tomlinson in Ottawa. Spent 10 years with Tomlinson, and I left Tomlinson in January of 2024. Now I'm with GIP. So you know, the rest of the time they were all moves within the same company. But to see younger people get into the industry, or new, and it doesn't even have to be younger, people get into the industry, you don't gain experience that quickly, or you don't become an expert in the industry over 2 years, 3 years. So putting your time in really in the long run pays off, because the industry does see that this person has put their time in, they're knowledgeable, and they, you know, they're great assets to the industry.
It's like you can't learn faster than you can learn, really.
No.
And what I'm hearing is that the persistence of people has changed. Were we hard workers back then, and are we working harder today, or is that like a generational thing?
I wouldn't say people worked extremely hard back then. I wouldn't say people work less hard today. Society's changed today. So, you know, one of the big aspects that I say to people all the time is you know, maybe when I started in 2000, but if you go back 40 years, 50 years, the vast majority of workers, particularly field workers in the construction industry, came or lived in a single income household, right? The hours of work in the construction industry, particularly because we're seasonal, they're long days. You start at 7 o'clock, you end at 5:30, and that's if you're not working nights or weekends. So, you know, the reliability of your schedule in the construction industry is very challenging. So if you look at what I'm used to in a large city, the city of Ottawa and Gatineau, is, you know, that's my background. That's not what I do now, and I can maybe get into that after. But in the construction industry, in the Ottawa area, a lot of the people, first of all, live scattered around the city, depending on where they can afford to live, and the jobs aren't at the same place every day. So you know, you're rebuilding a road in the east end of town, especially if you're a paving crew is a really good example, because they change locations every day.
Every
right?
day.
Almost every day. And so your job can be in the east end, it can be in the west end, it can be in the south end. So you're working, if you're working days, 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock, you've got to be there before, you got to leave later, and you're coming from a different location. You can't rely on the city bus, you can't rely on public transportation, because you never know where you're going to be, and the hours are all over the place.
You're not going to spend 3 hours in transit either. I'm exaggerating, but at least an hour and a half, you know, to get...
Absolutely. And so back then, most households were single income families. Somebody was at home, and you know, I don't want to get into the male-female, that's a whole different subject, right? In terms of, but back then there was one person that stayed at home, took care of the family in general. The other person worked really long hours and was less present with the family. Society's different today, where there are more expectations for both in a family to take care of the family. And the company owner in East region of Quebec told them, I was having the same discussion with him this year, and he said, you know what, my field staff, more and more the spouse has a job that is either public service or not, but 37 and a half hours a week, and they make more money than my field staff.
Really?
So when they have kids,
Who stays home?
well, it's not who stays home, it's you are expected to do the morning and I'm expected to do the evening, or you're expected to do your share. Whereas 40 years ago,
Wasn't like that.
this was, and it's still a very old school industry, but 40 years ago was, my job is these hours to these hours, I'm not helping with the kids, right? And not everybody's got kids, not everybody has families, but that's a big shift in the dynamic of our industry. And it really has changed the way you can attract people into the field staff. The field staff are probably, in road building, 60-70% of the employees are field staff. Well, all of a sudden, if there's a demographic that has family with children and they need to help out, you're not even attracting those people because that job is a no-go for them to begin with, right?
They're eliminating that option.
You're eliminating a large portion of the population because they're looking elsewhere.
Yeah, we're going to talk about labor scarcity a little bit later, but I wanted to come back on the fact that, like, before we had zero or almost no communication, and now we're entering an era with all of these young people that we're trying to attract in the construction industry, with somewhat of a work-life balance, family and work balance. And now with the arrival of digital tools, what do you see as an impact and challenges for the roadwork industry?
Well, there's good and there's bad about digital tools and just technology in general. So you have, most companies are now at a point where they have some sort of financial software that helps them track their costs. Most people have internal platforms for data sharing. You're either using the cloud or you're using SharePoint, or you're using something along those lines to share company information. Estimating tools are generally fairly advanced depending on who you're working with, but you can definitely work more quickly to put a tender together, costing information. Generally, some companies gather information a little bit and then they have an idea where they're sitting in terms of the relation of the estimate. Phones are at your fingertip. You can text people. You can contact people really quickly. So there's more communication. I question whether it's always efficient communication. Often there's just this overload of data and information that really is not always useful to the people in the field. And what you see more and more of is companies wanting financial information, and bigger companies are often run by accountants that basically these are the budgets and these are the forecasts, and what happens in the field seems almost secondary. It's just more, we want financial information back and we want it now. But there's more availability of that, right? Like, it really does help you. If you're a company with a good estimating software, you can bid work more quickly. So is there a better quality of life? I would say yes. There's probably a better quality of life for the majority of the people in the industry now, because you can get your work done a little more quickly. Some companies will allow people to do work from different locations. If you need to be a little more flexible, you can probably estimate a job from home on occasion. I'm a big believer that our field staff can't work from home. In general, there's much more value in being present for the field staff, because if you want to lead by example, you're there with the field staff as well, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a certain extent of that, but technology has gotten us to a point where everybody expects everything immediately, and that has become a little bit of a challenge, where you're sometimes overwhelmed with secondary, less important data and information that needs to be produced or given back to the office, when really the focus is the problem that's going on in the field that needs to be physically resolved.
Yeah.
Technology, social media has changed our industry tremendously, where we would get counselors from the city reach out to our company and say, this happened on a job site, change the way you're doing things. And it was
from social media.
From social media. It was a tweet, it was a picture, that was put on Facebook or put on Instagram, and then they would, attach at the counselor, and the counselor would call us and complain. And basically, and there's many examples that I can think of where it was a snapshot in a 3-hour event that a person got one picture, and the counselor labeled everything as though the contractor was doing something wrong.
But it didn't define the
it
entire
did not
situation.
define the situation, but social media has done that. There's a loud voice on every side of every topic, that people have a loud voice. And unfortunately, technology has gotten to the point where politicians are now involved in day-to-day activity of construction jobs. They shouldn't be. They're not the experts. The owners, the municipalities have great staff that work for them. They know what's going on, but they're stuck having to answer often to politicians that shouldn't be involved in the day-to-day of construction jobs. So there's a lot of really good. There's a lot of really bad that's happened with technology. Other advances. You look at machine control equipment, GPS, surveying. Fantastic technology that really has advanced the industry to be more productive. If you don't know how to use it properly, it can create more problems than it solves, right? So I'm a big fan of technology. It helps, but it doesn't replace experience.
Yeah, and we absolutely have to find this balance, because if we take the example of that tweet, technology actually diminished and reduced productivity because of that event that was not defining. But when you talk about machine controls, I've met with some operators that at the beginning wanted nothing to know about that. And when they started using it, now they can't get enough of it. It's like the GPS versus the paper map, right? Once you get to know it, you want to use it every day. So again, these younger people are adopting technologies. There's good and bad. I'm a true believer about balance, right? And everyone has their role to play, because accounting's critical in construction, but accounting will not solve and find solutions on the field. What happens if I put a portion of my stockpile there? I recuperate so much earth, and then you know what I'm talking about, Ivan, right? So there's a balance that we need to have, and getting in more precisely into those digital tools, it seems like you feel that there is an increase in productivity. We're able to get things done faster. Can we expand on that approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been fortunate to be a part of implementation of a couple different ERP and enterprise resource planning softwares. SAP with one company, the other one was Oracle, but they became our job costing software, and they're big monster softwares. They have a really good place in the industry. Maybe a little bit cumbersome on your day-to-day in terms of gathering your costs, but when you have the right tools, you can estimate work, you plan your work out through the estimate, and then when you track how your work is actually being performed against that estimate, it can really help you know whether you're being productive, whether you're not. On many projects, I would say if it's a short duration, you don't have time to course correct. If it's a long duration, you can course correct, and you can pivot. It gives you, if it's an activity that lasts for several weeks and you've got the right tools, you can see within a couple of days whether you're going in the right direction or you're not, and you can pull back and say, how are we going to look at this problem? Are we going to fix the problem? No, unfortunately, it was a missed tender. We're going to carry on and we're going to get it done. Or yes, we can course correct. If it's a short duration activity, you may not be able to course correct, but you can learn for the next time, right? So if these tools, when used properly and by the right people, when they know how to use them, they're really, really valuable, and it really helps a company be productive in the future. It helps them know how they should be bidding work, and it makes them more competitive in a market. It gives them an advantage over people that don't have those tools.
Amazing. So if we get into the hot topic about AI and we talk about AI on top of those tools, what do you think the impact's going to be?
I go back and forth with AI, but I'll use ChatGPT as an example, right? So I use ChatGPT to write letters, and I will say, write me a letter that says this, and this, and it'll write it in 12 seconds, and then I'll correct it, right? So I'll make some changes, I'll modify it, and I'll go through it. Then I can take the letter that I've written either in English or in French, and I can tell ChatGPT translate that letter into the other language. And it speeds up my work tremendously. I still have to be able to write so that I can go through it and fix the grammar, fix the spelling. But what would have taken me probably hours, I can now get done in, a fraction of the time, 20% of the time, 10% of the time. I can get that done much more quickly. So if I use AI in the context of construction, I don't think we'll ever get to the point, particularly with what I know about road building, that AI will build you a tender, because every job site is different. But it can take averages. It'll take averages from past jobs. An estimator would be able to take it and put together an estimate in 10%, 20% of the time that they normally would have. And then they still need the experience to go through and course correct for that particular project, right, to make sure they adjust accordingly. I think AI has tremendous possibilities of accelerating the rate at which we get work done. Probably gathering information from the field as well, and the Civalgo, that's right up your alley. For me, the potential of helping produce information and gather information back. I've seen AI in the utilities that I use it, and it is a huge help. So it really speeds things up. My only fear with that is that we just force people to take on more because they can get it done much faster, and it doesn't necessarily make their day-to-day job any better, right? So you end up with less people. If somebody can get the work done twice as fast, so we only need half the people. That is a concern of mine with AI. But at some point or another, companies need to be competitive, and they need to compete with others, and the only way to get by today is to take advantage of every single opportunity you have to be more productive. And I see AI, our industry is a slow adopter on everything, but I see AI starting to creep in, and I think it's going to have a great place in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking on lightning speeds, and it's a bigger revolution than what we've seen from the past to today, which was coming up tomorrow. Is very interesting to see that we can get things done so fast, right? Yeah. So the market's hyper competitive, and it will not replace the industry and the industry and the experience, right?
Absolutely.
What I'm sometimes preoccupied by is the brain muscle, right? People tend to use AI and follow it to the letter, but let's not forget that AI is there for recommendations. We're still the human beings, the engineer, the project managers that take the decisions. So I wanted to shift to our last subject of the day and really talk about the impact of construction associations within the construction industry. And I know you've participated in a few of them. I'd like to understand, why you joined those associations and what were the things that, they were able to move the needle on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been very, very fortunate in my career where from, I believe, 2012 to 2016, maybe 2011 to 2016, I was a director on the National Capital Heavy Construction Association, which is an association of contractors in the Ottawa market. There's probably 350 members. I think I was a director for 7 years, and I was president in 2015. It's an association that'll gather everybody from the road building industry. So you've got landscapers, you've got concrete contractors, road asphalt contractors, excavation. Basically, they kind of joked there was the Ottawa Construction Association that was, vertical builders, and then the Heavy Construction Association was underground builders, and we joked to say they were halfway to heaven and we were halfway to hell. But it was a community of contractors, and it still is very strong today, that would lobby with the city of Ottawa in particular, because it was the largest customer in that area, to make sure their specifications made sense, to make sure their tender calls made sense, to make sure they were being fair with contractors. The City of Ottawa has it's called a vendor performance management program that basically evaluates all contractors. And as of today, I believe it's your tenders, your 80% price and your 20% performance. So it's not necessarily low bid.
Which is interesting.
It's very interesting. It's a program they came out with probably 7 or 8 years ago. I was part of the committee to discuss with the city how it would be implemented. It's had its challenges. I won't lie, and the industry is still working with the city on it. But we used to have a liaison meeting with the city once a month where the deciders of, the managers of city infrastructure would meet with the committee from the liaison committee at the NCHCA, and we would have very open and frank conversations every month. Here are some problems you're having. How can we fix it? And they'd flip it back on us, and they were pretty direct as well. So everybody has their challenges, but the goal there was to work together and make improvements. So I got off the NCHCA because I became a member of what was at the time the Ontario Hot Mix Producers Association. It merged under ORBA and became the Ontario Asphalt Pavement Council. So it represents asphalt contractors and asphalt producers in the province of Ontario, as well as asphalt cement suppliers, which is what I do now. I'm responsible for business development and sales for an asphalt cement supplier. But the OAPC is really the voice of asphalt in the province of Ontario. Strong relationship with the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario, and all of the members across the province. So there's probably 150 to 160 asphalt plants in the province of Ontario. So that ties in well with everybody who's in that market there. I was fortunate I was chair of that. When they merged under ORBA, there was no longer president, so I never got the chance to be president. I became chair in 2020. And the year I was chair, you automatically, because it's a council under ORBA, you become a director of ORBA. So I was a director of ORBA that year, and the next year they voted me on. So until 2024, I was a director on both OAPC and ORBA. Very fortunate to have those experiences because you end up being part of associations that have directors that are really senior people within companies in the area that association represents. I'm fortunate to have built relationships with company owners, with VPs, presidents, all across the province. And the reason these people continue to contribute to these associations is because they care about the industry. They want to make the industry a better place. And they literally work together, even though you're competitors on job sites, you work together at the association level to make the industry a better place and to look down the road and say, what do we need to do to make this the right place to work in 20 years?
Yeah, it's totally amazing to see how they don't just say that they will make the construction industry a better industry, but they actually do it. The example with NCHCA and those performance type of bids is amazing, right? So I wanted to conclude this podcast with maybe one last piece of advice from you, Ivan. Looking back at your career, let's talk to roadwork contractors. Is there a few pieces of advice that you can give back to them in this modern time?
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff I can elaborate on. But if there's one thing, I do value association work. I think any contractor that is out there that sees themselves as a lone wolf that tries to do it on their own without contributing and giving back to the industry, I think that's a mistake. I think people need to work together at the association level. And talk about what I see the province of Quebec right now, where over the last 10 years there's been very little collaboration between the government entities and the industry, and there's been a block there since roughly 2012 with the Charbonneau inquiry. But collaboration with industry sometimes seems to have a bad reputation. You go out for a lunch with a contractor, you can't have the contractor pay for you because the reality is those relationships, collaborating between industry and owners is the only way that contracts and projects move forward in a very efficient way, right? You need to have those open relationships with people. You need to be able to tell them, you're doing this wrong. You're not paying me quickly. You're not. You need to pay me for this extra work, or you don't deserve to get paid for that extra work, right? You need to be able to have open working relationships with the owners and with the contractors in the same way you would with an employee, to say you need to do your work in an efficient way. And associations are that avenue to be able to work with the owners and work with government entities. And the more involvement people have with those associations, the more power those associations have to be able to make changes within the industry.
So if for a roadwork contractor, what I'm hearing is that communication and collaboration is key. That's how we move the needle on evolving the industry.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
whether it be with industry associations or whether it be with the owners and the inspectors on contracts and the consulting firms that manage contracts for municipalities. Right now, you see too often a block of communication, or a stoppage of communication between those entities, and it does not advance work. It doesn't get work done more quickly. It only creates roadblocks. And I hate to use the pun, but it creates roadblocks.
A very valuable piece of advice here, Ivan. I appreciate your time today. We went through the industry of yesterday to look at the present challenges and have a perspective on the future. We talked about technology and its impact and how we can benefit the industry by giving back and mostly by collaborating. So thank you so much, Ivan, for your time today. Don't forget to share this podcast if you want to help Savalgo in this mission to give back to the construction industry. Ivan, I'll see you soon and take care.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.